She thought she was spending Christmas Eve on a harmless date, until black cars pulled up outside and every man in the room suddenly stood when he did. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe. Christmas Eve was supposed to feel magical. That's what everyone said. The city certainly tried hard enough. Every storefront wrapped in white lights, every lamppost crowned with red bows, carols spilling from open doors as people hurried past with wrapped boxes tucked under their arms. But magic, she'd learned, was loud when you didn't belong to it. She stood at the edge of the sidewalk, hands buried deep in the pockets of her coat, watching couples weave through the snow-dusted streets. Laughter floated through the cold air, warm and effortless. Someone brushed past her, apologizing distractedly, already turning back to the person waiting for them. No one was alone tonight. No one except her. She hadn't planned to be out. The small apartment she'd returned to after work was quiet in a way that pressed against her chest, the kind of silence that made thoughts echo too loudly. A half-decorated tree stood in the corner, its lights blinking unevenly because she'd never gotten around to fixing the loose wire. She'd poured herself a glass of wine she didn't really want and stared at the reflection of the lights in the window, wondering how another year had slipped by without her life changing in any meaningful way.
So she'd put on her coat. Not to go anywhere specific, just to escape the stillness.
Now she lingered outside a cafe, fogged windows glowing gold from the inside. Through the glass, she could see families squeezed around small tables, mittens tossed aside, children clutching paper cups of hot chocolate. Someone raised a glass in a toast. Someone else leaned in to whisper something that made the woman across from him laugh. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She almost ignored it. Almost. But loneliness has a way of making you curious about things you'd normally dismiss. It was a message from Maya, her coworker, her occasional lunch companion, the person who always said she worried too much about being alone. Still free tonight? I know this is last minute, but my cousin's friend is in town and doesn't want to spend Christmas Eve alone. He asked if I knew someone kind and normal. No pressure at all. She stared at the screen longer than she meant to. Kind and normal. The words felt like a dare. She thought of her apartment, of the blinking lights and the unopened bottle of wine waiting for her return. She thought of another evening spent scrolling through photos of other people's happiness, telling herself she was fine with it. No pressure at all, the message said. That was the lie, wasn't it? There was always pressure. Pressure to say yes before the world decided you were someone who never did. She typed, deleted, typed again. It's Christmas Eve. I know, Maya replied almost instantly. Just dinner, public place. If it's awkward, you finish your meal and go home. 1 hour of your life. That's it. 1 hour. She exhaled slowly, watching her breath fog in the cold air. Somewhere behind her, church bells began to ring, deep and steady, counting down to midnight. People passed, wrapped in scarves and certainty, moving towards something waiting for them. She didn't have anything waiting. Fine, she typed before she could talk herself out of it. Just dinner. The relief that followed surprised her. It wasn't excitement. It was quieter than that, like loosening her grip on something she'd been holding too tightly for too long. The restaurant Maya sent was small and tucked between larger storefronts, the kind of place people found on purpose. When she stepped inside, warmth rushed over her, carrying the scent of pine and wine and something rich simmering in the kitchen. A fire crackled near the back, casting soft shadows across exposed brick walls. She checked her coat, smoothed her hair in the mirror by the entrance, and told herself this was nothing. A stranger. A conversation. Proof that she hadn't completely given up on being seen. He was already there. He stood as soon as he noticed her, tall and still, in a way that felt deliberate, as if he never wasted movement. His dark coat was perfectly fitted, his expression calm, but unreadable. Not nervous, not scanning the room. Waiting. When their eyes met, something tightened in her chest. Not fear, not attraction exactly, but awareness. The unsettling kind that made you feel suddenly present in your own skin. You must be her, he said, his voice low and steady, carrying easily over the soft hum of conversation. "I'm glad you came." She hesitated for half a second, just long enough to register that this date already felt nothing like she'd expected. So was she. And somewhere outside, unnoticed for now, engines idled in the cold. He pulled her chair out before she could reach for it, the gesture so smooth it caught her off guard. Not flashy, not exaggerated, just correct, as if he'd been raised to notice small things and never forget them. She murmured a thank you and sat, suddenly aware of how fast her heart was beating for no obvious reason. The restaurant felt warmer now, the glow from the candles softening the edges of everything. Evergreen garlands lined the windows, tiny white lights woven through the branches. Outside, snow drifted lazily past the glass, but inside, time seemed to slow. Conversations stayed low, laughter muted, the kind of place where people leaned in rather than spoke loudly. He took the seat across from her, folding his hands on the table. Up close, the stillness about him was even more striking. He didn't fidget, didn't glance around the room. His attention settled on her and stayed there, steady and unhurried, as if nothing else competed for it. "I'm sorry if this is awkward," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Blind dates aren't exactly my specialty." A faint smile touched his mouth, not wide, not playful, but real. "If it helps, neither are mine." That surprised her. Something about him had suggested confidence bordering on certainty, the kind of man who didn't find himself in situations by accident, yet the way he said it held no arrogance, just honesty. "I'm Luca," he added, extending his hand across the table. His grip was warm, firm, without being possessive. When their fingers touched, she felt it, an awareness that sparked and settled low in her chest. He released her hand immediately, as if he understood restraint as well as intensity. She told him her name. He repeated it once, quietly, like he was filing it away. A waiter appeared almost instantly, offering menus and water. The interaction was brief, professional, but she noticed the shift. The way the waiter's posture straightened, the flicker of recognition that passed across his face before he masked it. Luca thanked him, voice polite, eyes calm. The waiter lingered half a second longer than necessary before moving on. She frowned slightly. "Do you come here often?" "Sometimes," he said. "When I want somewhere quiet." That made sense. Everything about him felt intentional, controlled. Like noise was something he avoided rather than tolerated. They ordered wine. He waited until she'd chosen before making his selection, then nodded once, as if committing to a decision that couldn't be undone. When the waiter left, a comfortable silence settled between them, comfortable in a way she wasn't used to. Not strained, not rushed to be filled. "You don't seem surprised," she said finally. "About what?" "Being here. With me. On Christmas Eve." His gaze softened, just a fraction. "I don't think people end up alone on nights like this by accident." The words landed heavier than she expected. She glanced down at the table, tracing the rim of her glass with her finger. "Sometimes it just happens." "Yes," he agreed. "It does." There was no pity in his voice, no false reassurance, just acknowledgement. It made her feel seen in a way that unsettled her. As the evening unfolded, conversation came easily. Too easily. He asked about her work, listened without interrupting, remembered details she mentioned in passing. When she laughed, his eyes lingered like he was memorizing the sound. When she hesitated, he waited, giving her space instead of filling it. And yet, beneath the calm, there was something else. She noticed it in the way he sat, always angled slightly toward the room's entrance, in the way his gaze flicked briefly to the windows whenever the door opened, in the way his phone remained face down on the table, silent as if it didn't need to make noise to summon him. Dangerous, her mind supplied, unbidden. Not reckless danger, not chaos. This was the quiet kind, the kind that moved deliberately and left consequences behind it. The wine arrived. He lifted his glass, pausing until she did the same. to unexpected invitations, he said. She smiled despite herself, and surviving them. Their glasses clinked softly. The longer she sat across from him, the more the rest of the room seemed to fade. Conversations blurred into background noise. Couples came and went without her noticing. When he spoke, it felt like the world narrowed to the space between them, to the low timbre of his voice and the way he never once made her feel rushed or dismissed. At some point, she realized something that made her breath hitch slightly. He wasn't trying to impress her. There were no exaggerated stories, no careful self-deprecation, no hints dropped for approval. He simply existed in her presence, offering attention like it was something he valued rather than spent. And that, more than the danger she sensed beneath his composure, was what unsettled her most. Because men like him didn't end up on blind dates by coincidence. And yet here he was, on Christmas Eve, looking at her like she was exactly where he intended to be. It wasn't one thing that set her on edge. It was a collection of details so small they would have been easy to dismiss if she hadn't already been paying attention. The waiter returned with their appetizers, his movements careful, almost deferential. He placed Luca's plate first, then hers, hands steady but shoulders slightly tense. "If you need anything at all," he said, eyes flicking briefly to Luca before settling back on her. "Anything." Luca nodded once. "Thank you." The waiter didn't leave right away. He hovered, just long enough to make the moment feel off, then finally retreated toward the bar. She watched him go, then glanced back at Luca. "Is he always that attentive?" she asked lightly, trying to make it sound like a joke. Luca's mouth curved faintly. "Some people are observant. That's one word for it." He took a bite of his food, unbothered, as if nothing about the interaction had registered as unusual, or as if it had, and he simply didn't feel the need to explain. She studied him over the rim of her glass. His posture hadn't changed. Relaxed, but alert. Like a man who could stand up and leave in an instant if he needed to. Another couple passed their table on the way to the restroom. The man slowed, his gaze flicking to Luca with open curiosity before snapping forward again. The woman noticed too, her smile faltering for half a second as she followed her partner away. She shifted in her seat. "Do I have something on my face?" Luca asked, tone amused. "No," she said, then hesitated. "People keep looking at you." "They do that sometimes." Again, no elaboration, no apology, no discomfort. Just acceptance. She tried to brush it off, telling herself it was nothing more than a good-looking man in a well-tailored coat. People noticed things like that, especially on a night like this, when everyone was already half lost in wine and sentiment. Still, something didn't sit right. His phone lay on the table near his elbow, screen dark. It hadn't lit up once since she'd arrived. No buzzing, no notifications, no quick glances or distracted apologies. And yet, when the front door opened again, letting in a rush of cold air and laughter, his eyes lifted a split second before the sound reached them. He knew. She couldn't explain how she knew that he knew, but she felt it in the way his attention sharpened, then relaxed again when the door closed and the noise faded. "You're very present," she said before she could stop herself. His brow lifted slightly. "Is that a complaint?" "No," she admitted. "Just different." "Most people are only half where they are," he said. "It's a habit." She considered that. "And you?" "I prefer to know what's happening around me." A reasonable answer. Almost normal. Except the way he said it made her think of locked doors and contingency plans, of rooms measured in exits rather than decor. The waiter returned again, too soon, to refill Luca's water glass, even though it was barely touched. He didn't ask. He simply did it, nodding politely before stepping back. "Does he think you're someone important?" she asked, keeping her voice low. Luca met her gaze, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. "Does that bother you?" "I'm just curious." "So am I," he said, then let the silence stretch between them. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You're very good at not answering questions." I answer the ones that matter." That should have felt reassuring. Instead, it sent a shiver down her spine. A group of men entered the restaurant, coats dark and expensive, their laughter sharp. One of them noticed Luca almost immediately. The laughter died mid-step. A brief look passed between them. Respect? Recognition? Before the man inclined his head slightly and kept walking. Her stomach tightened. "That," she said quietly, "definitely wasn't nothing." Luca's gaze followed the men only long enough to confirm they'd moved on. "You're very observant." "Apparently. I'm learning from the best." He smiled at that, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. She leaned back in her chair, suddenly aware of how far from ordinary this evening had drifted. She'd come here expecting polite conversation and an easy excuse to leave early. Not this layered tension. Not the sense that she'd wandered into the outer edge of someone else's world. "You don't check your phone," she said, changing tactics. "Not once." "I don't need to." "How do you know?" "Because if something changes," he said calmly, "I'll know." The certainty in his voice made her breath hitch. There was no bravado there. No threat. Just fact. She stared at him, her curiosity now fully awake, her earlier loneliness replaced by something sharper and more dangerous. "What are you not telling me?" she asked. Luca held her gaze, unflinching. "Tonight?" "Yes." A beat passed, then another. The restaurant hummed softly around them, oblivious. "Nothing that will hurt you," he said at last. It wasn't the reassurance she'd expected. It was more unsettling. Because he hadn't said nothing would happen. Only that she wouldn't be hurt by it. And outside, unseen through the glowing windows, snow continued to fall. Quiet, patient, and heavy with the promise that this night was far from over. The second glass of wine softened the edges of her nerves without dulling her awareness. The tension didn't disappear, but it shifted. Less sharp, more intimate. The restaurant seemed quieter now, the earlier crowd thinning as families drifted home and couples paid their checks with lingering kisses and promises of tomorrow. Outside, snow thickened, the flakes larger, slower, as if the night itself was settling in. She traced the stem of her glass, watching the candlelight flicker through the deep red liquid. "I didn't think I'd say yes," she admitted. "When Maya texted me, I almost stayed home." "But you didn't," Luca said. "No." She smiled faintly. "I was tired of pretending I didn't mind being alone. Christmas makes it harder to lie to yourself." He didn't rush to respond. He never did. He waited, giving her space in a way that made it easier to keep talking. "I used to like nights like this," she continued. "Quiet, simple. But after a while it stops feeling peaceful and starts feeling empty. Like everyone else moved forward and forgot to tell you where the road went." Her voice wavered just slightly. She hated that. Hated the vulnerability creeping in, but once it started, it felt impossible to stop. "I thought I'd have a different life by now," she said. "Not perfect, just shared. Someone to come home to. Someone who notices when you don't say much at dinner because you're tired of explaining yourself." Luca's eyes never left her face. Not once. No judgment, no pity, just attention. "Starting over is lonely," he said quietly. She nodded. "People tell you it's brave. They don't tell you how isolating it is, how you keep wondering if you missed your chance while you were busy surviving." "That's not missing your chance," he said. "That's enduring." The word settled between them, heavy and gentle at the same time. She swallowed, surprised by the sudden tightness in her throat. "What about you?" she asked. "You don't strike me as someone who's usually alone." Something shifted then. Subtle, but real. His shoulders eased back against the chair, but his gaze darkened, retreating inward for just a moment. "I'm surrounded by people," he said. "That's not the same thing." "No," she agreed softly. "It isn't." He lifted his glass but didn't drink. "Most nights, I'm exactly who people expect me to be. Tonight," he paused, searching for the right words. Tonight is the only night I can pretend to be normal. Her breath caught. Pretend? Yes. He finally took a sip of wine, as if steadying himself. No expectations. No obligations. No performances that matter beyond this table. She studied him, the composed man with the quiet danger coiled beneath his calm, and saw something almost fragile flicker beneath it. Why tonight? She asked. Because Christmas Eve is forgiving, he said. People allow softness tonight. They assume it belongs. She smiled sadly. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, he said simply. I go back to being who I am. The weight of that pressed against her chest. She understood it instinctively, the idea of roles you step into so often, they start to feel permanent. What if you didn't? She asked. What if you let yourself be normal more often? His mouth curved, but there was no humor in it. Normal is a luxury. They fell quiet again, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. Around them, the restaurant dimmed further as staff began preparing for closing, candles burning lower, music softer. Snow piled along the windowsills, muffling the city beyond. I didn't expect to talk like this tonight, she said eventually. I thought it would be small talk and polite smiles and an early exit. And yet, he said, here we are. Here we are. She felt lighter and heavier at the same time, seen, understood, and aware that whatever this was, it lived on borrowed time. You listen like what I'm saying matters, she said quietly. That's rare. It matters because you're saying it, he replied. Her pulse jumped at the simplicity of it. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine something else. Not a future, she didn't dare go that far, but a version of this night that didn't end. A version where she didn't have to return to blinking lights in an empty apartment. Thank you, she said, for tonight, for being here. Luca's gaze softened, but there was a sadness beneath it now. I'm glad you said yes, he said, even if just once. Something in his tone told her this was already a goodbye in disguise. Outside, the snow kept falling, thick and quiet, blanketing the world in white. And somewhere deep in her chest, she felt the strange, aching certainty that this night, this pretending, was about to end. She noticed the change before she understood it. The restaurant had been winding down, staff clearing tables quietly, voices low and unhurried. Then, without warning, the air shifted. Not louder, not dramatic, just tense, like a held breath spreading outward. Luca's gaze lifted toward the window. She followed it instinctively. At first, she saw only snow and reflections, white lights blurring against the glass. Then, movement. Dark shapes sliding into place along the curb, one after another. Black SUVs, their engines idling softly, too quiet for their size, too deliberate to be coincidence. Her stomach tightened. That's a lot of cars, she said, trying to sound casual, trying to convince herself this was nothing more than a wealthy family arriving late somewhere nearby. Luca didn't answer right away. His posture changed, not abruptly, not enough for anyone else to notice, but she felt it. The calm composure sharpened into something alert and coiled. He reached for his glass, took one final sip, then set it down with careful precision. Finish your wine, he said gently. Her heart skipped. Why? Before he could answer, the front door opened. Cold air rushed in, carrying snow and silence with it. The laughter near the bar cut off mid-sentence. Conversations faltered. Every head turned. Men stepped inside. They moved with purpose. Dark coats, broad shoulders, expressions carved from stone. One hand inside a coat, another brushing the small of a back where a weapon might be concealed. They didn't scan the room wildly. They didn't need to. They already knew where they were going. A waiter froze halfway across the floor, tray trembling in his hands. Someone near the window whispered a sharp, frightened curse. Chairs scraped softly as people shifted away, instinctively creating space. The men didn't look at her. They looked at Luca, and something unmistakable passed between them. Not recognition alone, but acknowledgement, respect, obedience. The room changed instantly. Not panic, not chaos, submission. She felt it like a weight pressing down on her chest. Luca rose from his chair slowly, calmly, like a man answering a door he'd expected. "I was hoping we'd have more time," he said quietly, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. Her pulse roared in her ears. "Time for what?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, something fierce broke through his restraint. "To keep this simple." One of the men approached the table, stopping a respectful distance away. "It's time," he said. His accent was thick, his tone deferential. "I know," Luca replied. Another man moved to the door, holding it open. Outside, more figures stood in the snow, their outlines sharp under the streetlights. She stood too, legs unsteady. "Luca," she whispered, unable to keep the tremor from her voice. "What is happening?" His hand found hers, warm, solid, grounding. He squeezed once, firm and reassuring. "You're safe," he said immediately. "Nothing here is for you." That didn't help. Not when armed men surrounded the room. Not when every instinct she had screamed that she was suddenly very, very close to something she didn't understand. "This isn't normal," she said, breath shallow. "No," he agreed. "It isn't." The man nearest them glanced at her, then back to Luca. "We can wait outside if you prefer." Luca's jaw tightened. "No, we're leaving." "We." The word hit her harder than the guns. He guided her toward the door, his body subtly positioned between her and everyone else. She felt eyes on her back as they moved, fearful, curious, calculating. She'd never been the center of attention like this, never felt so exposed. As they stepped outside, the cold slammed into her lungs. Snow fell steadily now, thick flakes landing on dark metal and polished shoes. The SUVs formed a perfect line along the curb, engines humming softly, headlights cutting through the night. Men stood watch at precise intervals, alert and motionless. This was not protection. This was power. She stopped short, hand tightening in Luca's. "You said this was just dinner." "It was," he said, turning to face her fully. "For you." Her voice barely worked. "And for you?" His gaze softened, regret flickering beneath the steel. "For me, it was borrowed time." A door opened. Another man nodded once. Luca brushed snow from her sleeve with surprising tenderness. "I didn't expect them tonight." "You knew this could happen," she said. "Yes." "And you still came." "Yes." The truth settled in, heavy and unavoidable. This date had never been ordinary. She'd agreed to dinner on Christmas Eve to escape being alone. Instead, she'd stepped into the edge of a world where men arrived armed, silence followed orders, and the man beside her commanded it all without raising his voice. Luca leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "If you want to walk away right now," he said quietly, "I'll make sure you get home safely. You never see me again. This ends here." Her heart hammered as she looked at the black cars, the waiting men, the calm danger wrapped in the man who still held her hand. Snow continued to fall, and for the first time that night, she understood that whatever she chose next would change everything. The cold cut through her coat as soon as the restaurant door closed behind them, but Luca didn't release her hand. If anything, his grip tightened, not possessive, not panicked, just steady. Anchoring, like he was reminding her that she was not alone in this moment, no matter how unreal it felt. Snow crunched under polished shoes as one of the men opened the door of the nearest SUV. Another stepped forward, scanning the street with a practiced sweep of his gaze. Everything about them moved with quiet efficiency, as he out of chaos, was something they'd learned to manage by refusing to acknowledge it. She stood frozen, heart racing, breath coming too fast. "Look at me," Luca said softly. She did. The noise of the city faded, the engines, the men, the cold. All of it receded under the weight of his attention. His eyes were calm, unflinching, a deep, steady brown that held no fear. Only certainty. "You're safe with me," he said. Not a promise, a fact. Her throat tightened. "You keep saying that like you're sure." "I am." One of the men cleared his throat. "We should move." Luca lifted a single finger without looking away from her. The man stopped immediately. That alone sent a shiver down her spine. "Whatever happens next," Luca continued quietly, "will not touch you. No one here has permission to even look at you the wrong way." Permission. The word felt heavy, absolute. She swallowed. "Luca, what are you mixed up in?" His thumb brushed the back of her hand, grounding. "Later," he said. "Right now, I need you to stay close to me. Can you do that?" The question wasn't condescending. It wasn't commanding. It was careful, as if her answer mattered. "Yes," she whispered, though her legs felt unsteady. "Good." He nodded once, then turned slightly, positioning her behind his shoulder as they moved toward the SUV. His body blocked the view of the street, the men, the weapons she tried not to focus on. Every step he took was measured, protective without being theatrical. The door opened wider. Warm air spilled out, scented with leather and something faintly metallic. She hesitated at the threshold. "If you don't want to get in," Luca said quietly, "say the word." "And if I don't?" "Then you get in," he said, "and I make sure you get home safe." That word again. Safe. She climbed inside. The door closed with a soft, final sound that made her heart jump. The city beyond the tinted windows blurred into shadows and falling snow. Luca slid in beside her, close enough that their shoulders brushed. He didn't crowd her, but his presence filled the space, solid and reassuring. The engine pulled away from the curb. She exhaled shakily, only now realizing how tightly she'd been holding herself together. "People were staring," she said, voice low. "They were scared." "Yes." "Of them?" she asked. "Of what happens when people like me stop being patient?" Her pulse spiked. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" A corner of his mouth lifted. "It's meant to be honest." The SUV turned smoothly through snow-lined streets, passing storefronts and glowing windows where families gathered around tables and trees. Christmas Eve continued on, oblivious. One of the men in the front seat spoke quietly into a device, words clipped and efficient. Luca listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When the man finished, Luca nodded once. "All clear," he said. She watched him, the man who'd listened to her talk about loneliness over wine, who'd laughed softly at her dry humor, who'd looked at her like she mattered. And now this, commanding men, moving through the city like danger itself, bent around him. "You didn't panic," she said. "There was nothing to panic about." "For you," she corrected. He turned to her fully then. "For you, either." She laughed weakly. "That's not how it felt." "I know." His voice softened. "Fear doesn't mean you're not safe. It just means you understand what's at stake." "And what's at stake?" she asked. He considered her for a moment, as if deciding how much truth she could handle. "Tonight," he said slowly, "what's at stake is whether you walk away from this untouched, or whether you let me keep you close a little longer." Her heart thudded. "You make it sound like a choice." "It is," he said. "I won't force you into my world." "But you're already in mine," she said. "Yes." His gaze didn't waver. "And that's why I won't let anyone hurt you." Silence settled between them, thick but not uncomfortable. Outside, the city glided past, wrapped in white and gold. Inside, she felt suspended between the life she'd known and something darker, deeper, more dangerous. "Luca," she said quietly, "you promised me this was just dinner." "It was," he replied, "and now it's something else." The SUV slowed, pulling to a stop beneath a streetlight. Snow continued to fall, soft and relentless. He reached for her hand again, holding it like he'd been doing it forever. "Whatever happens next," he repeated, "I'm here. Stay close to me." She didn't pull away. Because despite the fear, despite the men and the guns and the undeniable danger, she believed him. And that belief scared her more than anything else that night. The SUV rolled to a smooth stop beneath a canopy of lights strung across a quiet side street. The engine idled, low and steady. A sound that seemed to seal them inside their own pocket of time. Snow brushed softly against the windows, blurring the city into pale streaks of gold and white. Luca didn't move right away. Neither did she. For a moment, they sat shoulder to shoulder in silence, the weight of everything unsaid pressing against the space between them. She could still feel the echo of the restaurant, the stares, the sudden fear, the way the world had shifted the second those men had walked in. Her heart had slowed, but her thoughts hadn't. "You said you'd explain," she said quietly. "I did." His voice was calm, but something darker lived beneath it now. Not menace. Truth. He turned to face her fully, one arm resting along the back of the seat, close but not touching. "Christmas Eve is complicated for me," he began. "It's the only night of the year when certain rules bend." "Rules?" she echoed. "Enemies expect me to be visible tonight," he said. "Traditions matter in my world. Appearances matter. Where I am, who I'm with. Those things send messages, whether I intend them to or not." Her chest tightened. "Your world." "Yes." The word carried finality. He exhaled slowly. "I don't run businesses that show up in polite conversations. I don't have the luxury of anonymity. The men you saw tonight, they weren't there to threaten me. They were there to make sure nothing happened." She searched his face, trying to reconcile the man who'd listened to her talk about loneliness with the one who required armed protection. "So, what are you?" A faint, humorless smile touched his lips. "Someone who learned very young that power is the only language some people respect." "That's not an answer." "It's the safest one." Her jaw tightened. "I don't want safe. I want honest." He held her gaze, something unreadable passing through his eyes. Then he nodded once. "I control things," he said simply. "People. Territory. Decisions that ripple outward whether I like it or not. Loyalty keeps me alive. Betrayal gets people hurt." Her breath caught. "You're dangerous." "Yes." The admission came without pride or apology. "And tonight?" she asked. "Why tonight?" "Because Christmas Eve is when my enemies watch the closest," he said. "They expect weakness, distraction, sentiment. They look for cracks." "And you?" she whispered. "I don't give them any." He paused. "Except tonight." Her heart skipped. "Why?" "Because I wanted one night where I wasn't calculating every move," he said. "One night where I could sit across from someone who didn't know my name carried weight. Where I could listen to you talk about starting over and pretend, just for a few hours, that I could want softness without it costing someone something." The vulnerability in his voice was quiet but devastating. "And it's dangerous," she said slowly, "because softness makes you human." "Yes." His eyes darkened. "And humanity is a liability." She wrapped her arms around herself, absorbing the truth. "So the men at the restaurant were making sure my presence didn't invite attention I couldn't control." "And me?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. "You were never supposed to be involved," he said at last. "You said yes to dinner, that's it. Everything after that is my responsibility." "That's not how it feels," she said. It feels like I walked into something I don't understand. You did. He leaned closer, voice low. And I'm sorry for that. The sincerity in his apology unsettled her more than the danger. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She asked. Because the moment I did, this night would stop being yours. He met her gaze. And I didn't want to take that from you. Silence stretched between them, heavy and fragile. Do you regret it? She asked. No. The answer was immediate. I regret that it couldn't stay simple. I don't regret choosing you for this night. Her pulse raced. Choosing me? Yes. His voice softened. I could have canceled. I could have sent an excuse. I didn't. The SUV remained still, the men outside giving them space without being told. Snow continued to fall, quiet and relentless. This life, she said slowly, doesn't leave room for what you were tonight. No, he agreed. It doesn't. Then why let it happen at all? Because even men like me need to remember what they're fighting to protect. His gaze dropped to her lips, then lifted again. And because tonight reminded me of something dangerous. What? That softness doesn't weaken me. His voice lowered. It makes me want to burn down anything that threatens it. A shiver ran through her, not fear, but something sharper. I don't know what to do with this, she admitted. You don't have to decide anything tonight, he said. When we stop, I'll make sure you get home safely. Tomorrow, you can forget me if you want. And if I don't want to? His eyes held hers, intense and unguarded. Then you understand exactly why tonight is dangerous for me. The engine hummed softly beneath them. Snow whispered against glass, and in the quiet, she realized the truth. He couldn't hide wasn't his power or his enemies. It was the fact that for one night, he'd let her matter. The car remained still, the engine idling like a patient reminder that time hadn't stopped just because her world had tilted. Outside, the snow fell heavier now, softening the streetlights into hazy halos. Inside, the air felt charged, quiet, expectant, dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with weapons. Luca broke the silence first. When we get to the next corner, he said calmly, the driver can take you home. Her chest tightened. Just like that? Yes. No drama, no pressure, no conditions. You go back to your life, he continued. This night becomes a story you tell yourself once or twice a year. A strange Christmas Eve. Nothing more. And you? She asked. I go back to mine. The simplicity of it hurt more than she expected. You said I could forget you, she said slowly. You can, he replied. I'll make sure no one ever comes looking for you. No messages, no shadows following you home. I disappear completely from your life. The idea should have been comforting. Safety. Normalcy. A clean line drawn through the chaos of the last few hours. Instead, it felt like grief. She stared out the window, watching snow swirl past the glass. Somewhere beyond the blur were apartment buildings, and quiet streets, and people finishing dessert, unaware of the choice hanging in the air. And the other option? She asked. Luca didn't hesitate. You stay. Her heart pounded. You stay with me tonight, he said. Not because you owe me anything. Not because you're afraid. But because you want to see what happens when you don't walk away from something just because it's complicated. And after tonight? She whispered. After tonight, he said carefully. Nothing about your life will be simple again. There it was. The truth, stripped of romance. My world has teeth, he continued. It can protect you in ways most people never experience. Doors open, problems disappear. No one touches what's mine. Mine. The word landed like a spark. But it can also destroy things, he added quietly. It attracts danger, attention, people who don't care who they hurt to get what they want. She wrapped her arms around herself. You make it sound like a warning.
It is, he said. I won't dress it up. If you step into this, you step in with your eyes open.
And if I leave, she said, I stay safe.
Ordinary.
Yes. Alone, she finished, the words slipping out before she could stop it. Luca's jaw tightened. Alone doesn't mean empty.
No, she agreed. But empty is what it feels like.
The car began to move, rolling slowly forward. Her heart leapt. This is the last turn, Luca said softly. I need your answer. Panic flared. Not the sharp fear from before, but something deeper. The fear of choosing wrong, of choosing comfort and wondering forever what might have been, or choosing danger and losing herself in it. She thought of the restaurant lights, of the way he'd listened like her words mattered, of the calm certainty in his voice when he said you're safe with me, of the life waiting for her, quiet, predictable, unchanged. She turned to him. If I stay, I don't want to be a secret. You won't be. I don't want to be controlled. You won't be, he said firmly. I don't cage people. I protect them, or I let them go. And if I change my mind, she asked.
Then I walk you out myself, he said. No consequences.
The sincerity in his eyes made her throat burn. The car slowed at the intersection. Snow-covered trees blurred past. A quiet street branched off to the right, the way home. This is it, Luca said. Her breath shook as she made her choice. Don't turn, she said softly. The driver didn't hesitate. The wheel shifted left. Her heart slammed against her ribs as the street disappeared behind them. Luca's hand covered hers, warm and steady. Not triumphant, not possessive. Just there.
You're sure? He asked.
No, she said honestly. But I'm tired of always choosing the safe thing. He nodded once. Then stay close to me. The city lights grew brighter ahead, reflecting off snow and glass and possibility. She didn't know if this world would save her or ruin her. She only knew that walking away now would haunt her forever. And for the first time in a long time, she chose the unknown. The bells began just as the car slowed. Deep, resonant chimes rolled through the night, echoing between buildings and drifting over the snow-covered streets. Midnight, Christmas Day. The sound felt ancient and grounding, like the city itself was marking a moment that mattered whether anyone noticed or not. The SUV pulled to a stop beneath a canopy of falling snow. Lights spilled from a wide entrance ahead. Stone steps, iron railings, a courtyard dusted white. Men stood nearby, not hidden, not rushed. Present, visible, waiting. Luca didn't move right away. He turned to her instead, studying her face as if committing it to memory. Once we step out, he said quietly, there's no pretending anymore. Her pulse quickened. You said I wouldn't be a secret. I meant it. His gaze sharpened. People will see you with me. They'll assume things. They'll talk. And you don't care? I care, he said. I just don't care enough to choose differently. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean. Snowflakes clung to the dark fabric of his coat as he stepped out first, then turned back toward her. He offered his hand. Not hurried, not cautious. Open. She hesitated only a second before placing her hand in his. The contact grounded her instantly, warmth spreading through her fingers as she stepped onto the snow-dusted pavement. The world seemed to pause. Heads turned, conversations stopped. Men who had been speaking quietly straightened, their attention locking onto Luca. And then, inevitably, shifting to her. She felt it all at once, the weight of awareness, the curiosity, the unspoken questions. Who is she? Why is she here? Why now? Luca didn't let go of her hand. He didn't rush her forward or pull her closer to hide her from view. Instead, he slowed, guiding her beside him, his pace deliberate. Calm, commanding without effort. One of the men approached, lowering his voice.
Is this?
Yeah, Luca said simply. The man glanced at her, then nodded once. No skepticism, no objection. He stepped back immediately. Her breath caught. This wasn't protection in the shadows. This was acknowledgement. They moved through the courtyard together as snow fell heavier, flakes settling into her hair and onto Luca's shoulders. The bells rang again, closer now, louder, their echoes vibrating in her chest. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. People are staring.
I know. And you're not stopping them.
No, he said softly.
I'm letting them look.
She searched his face. Why? Because I want them to see who I chose to bring with me. Chose. The word warmed something deep inside her, something she hadn't realized had gone cold over the years. Chosen openly, not hidden, not tucked away to avoid complications or judgment. A woman nearby whispered something to her companion. A man nodded in Luca's direction with unmistakable respect. Another stared openly, eyes narrowing with interest. Luca met each look without flinching, his hand firm in hers, his presence unmistakable. She wasn't an afterthought. She was a statement. They stopped beneath the archway as the bells finished their final peal. The sound faded slowly, leaving behind a hush broken only by the soft whisper of falling snow. Luca turned to her fully. In my world, he said quietly, people expect me to keep distance, to protect what matters by hiding it. And you're not, she said.
No.
His thumb brushed the back of her hand, a small, intimate gesture done without concern for who might see.
I'm doing the opposite.
Her chest tightened. Won't that make things harder for you?
Yes. Then why?
Because pretending you don't exist would cost me more. The honesty in his voice stole her breath. A nearby camera flashed. Someone captured the moment without asking. Luca didn't react. He didn't pull away. He stepped closer instead. I don't choose lightly, he said. And I don't choose twice. Snow gathered on her lashes as she blinked back emotion she hadn't expected. For years she'd been careful, quiet. The one who didn't take up space. The one who made herself smaller so no one would feel inconvenienced by her presence. Now, standing here under falling snow and ringing bells, she felt anything but small. She felt seen. Wanted. He leaned down slightly, his voice meant only for her.
If you ever feel like you don't belong here, he said, tell me. I'll walk away with you.
And if I don't? She asked.
Then stand with me, he replied, exactly like this.
She squeezed his hand, anchoring herself in the moment. Around them, the city welcomed Christmas with light and sound and quiet wonder. And in the open, undeniable clarity of midnight under the snow, she understood something that changed everything. He wasn't hiding her from his world. He was bringing her into it. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like something that needed to be protected by distance. She felt like someone worth choosing, out loud, under the falling snow, where everyone could see. Dawn arrived quietly, almost cautiously, as if the night itself wasn't ready to let go of what it had changed. The snow had stopped sometime before morning, leaving the city wrapped in white and silence. Streetlights dimmed one by one, their glow fading as pale winter light crept across rooftops and windowsills. From the floor-to-ceiling glass of the apartment she stood at now, Chicago looked softer, cleaner, like it had been given a chance to begin again. She hugged the mug of coffee between her hands, barely tasting it. Sleep had come in fragments, short stretches broken by awareness, by the unfamiliar comfort of knowing someone else was awake when she was. The night replayed in her mind in pieces. Church bells, falling snow, the way Luca's hand never left hers, the weight of being seen without apology. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn right away. She didn't need to. Luca stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could feel his presence like warmth at her back. No rush, no uncertainty. Just there. You didn't sleep much, he said quietly. Neither did you.
No, he agreed.
She finally turned, studying him in the pale morning light. Without the sharp contrast of night and shadow, he looked different. Still powerful, still composed, but softer around the edges, like the man from the restaurant had never fully left. I keep waiting to wake up, she admitted, for this to feel less real. It won't, he said. Not today. The certainty in his voice sent a shiver through her. Not fear, but understanding. I don't recognize my life anymore, she said. Yesterday morning I was planning to eat dinner alone and go to bed early. And now? And now I don't know where I belong. The words weren't accusation, just truth. Luca stepped closer, resting his hands lightly on the counter beside her, giving her space even as he closed the distance. Your life changed, he said. That doesn't mean it disappeared. It feels like it did. He nodded. Because quiet can feel safe. Predictable. But it can also keep you small. She swallowed. You're not offering safety. No. His gaze held hers. I won't lie to you. My world will never be gentle. There will be nights like last night, uncertain, heavy, dangerous. And yet, she said softly, I don't feel afraid right now. Because you're not alone, he replied. The simplicity of it nearly undid her. I can't promise you protection from everything, he continued. I can't promise nothing will ever touch your life again. But I can promise this. Whatever darkness comes, you won't face it by yourself. She searched his face for exaggeration, for empty words. She found none. What if I decide this is too much? She asked. What if I wake up tomorrow and realize I can't live in your world? Then you tell me, he said, and I'll walk you out myself. No resentment, no consequences. And you'll let me go? Yes. The honesty hurt in the best possible way. She looked back out at the city, at the slow awakening of Christmas morning. Somewhere, families were stirring. Children were waking up to wrapped gifts and excited whispers. Somewhere else, people were starting the day exactly as they always had. She wasn't one of them anymore. I don't know what comes next, she said. Neither do I, Luca admitted. I only know I don't regret choosing you. Her chest tightened. You chose me. I did. He didn't hesitate. And I'll keep choosing you, as long as you're willing to stand with me. The weight of the words settled deep. This wasn't a fairy tale promise of safety or simplicity. It was an offer of partnership, of presence. She set the mug down, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the magnitude of what she was accepting. My old life is gone, she said. Yes. And I can't pretend I didn't want more than it ever gave me. His expression softened. Then don't pretend. She stepped closer, resting her forehead against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Solid, real, unyielding. For the first time in a long time, she whispered, I don't feel invisible. His arms came around her slowly, deliberately, like he understood the weight of the moment. You were never invisible, he said. You were just waiting to be seen by someone who knew how to look. Outside, the sun climbed higher, illuminating the snow until it glittered. Christmas morning had arrived, not with carols or crowded rooms, but with clarity. Her quiet life was gone. In its place was something harder, wilder, honest. A man who didn't promise safety, but promised he would stand beside her when the world grew dark. And for the first time in years, that felt like everything.